The Revolve command is a way for you to create a surface by taking a NURBS curve and rotating it in a circular arc. It's very, very easy to use and a very common modeling tool. I actually use it quite a bit. Let me show you how this works. I'll start off by grabbing my CV curve tool, and let's come over here to the side view, and I'll click out some points, and we'll do sort of a tried and true, very common example of this command. Notice I am grid snapping, which you don't necessarily have to do. It's just going to make my life a little bit easier. All right. So there's our curve, and now I can come under Surfaces, Revolve, and let's go ahead and reset all of my settings, and simply click Apply. And you can see what just happened. We took our NURBS curve, and we rotated it around 360 degrees and got a surface. Now, at its most basic level, this is what the tool is all about, just creating surfaces in this manner. By default, as soon as you've created the surface, you've got some construction history, so you can come back in and make adjustments to the curve and, in effect, change the way the surface looks. Very cool. Now let's take a look at some of the settings for this command. Take this cup and kind of pull it out of the way. First off, you have the axis preset. This controls the axis in which you'd like to create your shape. Basically, which way you want your curve to spin around. Notice by default it was set to Y, and if we look at our object when we apply it, the curve has indeed spun around the Y-axis 360 degrees to create our cup. So we can kill that off. If I set this over to X, it would spin around this way, so we just get a really nasty-looking flat plane, like so, which we can't really use that. But we could set this around to Z, and we get this sort of interesting jello mold, maybe hubcap shape. I'm not sure, but it is interesting looking. Now, from here, you can also set this to free, where you can specify your own vector for the axis. So you could set this to 0.5 in X, 0.5 in Y, and 0, and click Apply, and you've just basically created your own custom vector. Admittedly, for just about all of my projects, I don't think I've ever really needed to use this. Rotating in a single axis works just fine. We can also change the pivot point of the rotation. By default, you're using the object's pivot point, meaning that if I were to come in here and press Insert and move the pivot, say, over to here, and then create a revolve, notice we're rotating about the pivot of the object, like so. If you want, though, like let's say you have created a curve whose pivot point is flown really far away, but in this case, because we have snapped our curve over here to the origin, we might as well just go ahead and revolve about the origin. So we could set this over to a preset value, leave it at 0, 0, 0, and we get a cup once again. You can also, of course, come in here and set your pivot point to any numeric value in X, Y, and Z space. So you can rotate about any point you want in 3D. Now, from here, let me go ahead. I'll actually undo back until my pivot is back here at the origin where it belongs. You can change the surface degree of your output surface to be linear or cubic. So, of course, if you go to linear, you get a nice sort of blocky effect with straight lines because your surface is linear in that direction. It is still going to be cubic as you travel up the surface. So notice it's still nice and curvy and flowy here. It's only cubic as you rotate around. So just something for you to kind of be aware of. You can control the start and end sweep angle for the rotation. By default, this is set to 360 degrees, so we're rotating all the way around. So if I set this over to 180, like so, we only get half a cup, as you can see here. This is very handy for creating a variety of objects. You need to make the canopy of a jet fighter. You can just make like a profile curve for it and rotate it around and then put your new object into place. And sort of a quick thing I would like to mention sort of off to the side, you'll notice in the bottom of a lot of these shapes, we have this little tiny black dot. You're going to notice this wherever all of the points of a NURBS surface completely sit right on top of one another without any room in between them. You can fix this by making a little bit of a gap, and I can actually do this over here on my curve. I'll do it from really far away at first. We can just grab that center vertex, and of course, you know right now I still have history, so any adjustments I make to the curve are reflected in the surface. So if I take this centermost CV and I pull it back just a little bit, we lose that. Now, I pulled it pretty far, so we end up with a hole in the bottom of the cup. But if I were to zoom really, really close into that CV and give it just the smallest amount of movement backwards, notice that I've gotten rid of the dark spot in the bottom of my cup, and there is a hole there. I mean, if you got right down on the surface, in fact, you can just barely make it out in the video if you look right inside my cursor right now. That's where it is. But to the normal viewer's eye, there's no hole there, so that's going to work out fine. So just be aware of that. If you see those little dark spots in the center of your Revolve, you can take those out by adjusting your CVs. All right, so you can also control the tolerance that is being used to create your surface. By default, you probably won't need any, so it is set to none. You can set this to global or local tolerance, which will use the positional tolerance over in your preferences window. I'm going to go ahead and leave this set to none. And if you leave this off, you can control the amount of segments that you get around the surface. So notice this is set to 8 by default. The interesting thing here is I have 8 segments around this way. But on the 180-degree one, I have 8 segments as well, because it took that into account. You can change this after the fact. You have a Revolve node that is created, of course. So all of these attributes you can affect later on. So I can take my end sweep and bring it down. I can take my number of sections and lift that or lower that as I see fit. Very, very handy feature. And from here, you can control whether or not you're using the complete curve or just the partial curve. This is really kind of interesting. Let me set this back over to 360, and we'll switch on partial, and I'll create a Revolve. Now, what happens when you do this is you get a sub-curve node where you can control the min and max value of the curve in UV space to control how much of it you want to use. Now, setting this numerically can be kind of a pain. I prefer using the Show Manipulator tool, and you get these 2 little markers where you can control how much of the curve you want to use for that operation. So there you go. I imagine you could probably do some animation with that and get some cool effects. Maybe. Hard to say. But anyways, there you go. And let's open up our curve, our options again. We also can control our output geometry, which right now we're most interested in NURBS. NURBS is going to be the default surface that comes out of this. If you want, after the Revolve is over, you can convert it over to polygons automatically using the exact same settings that can be found under Modify, Convert, NURBS to Polygons, like so. Of course, you can output to subdivision surfaces if you like, or Bezier surfaces if you prefer the Bezier style workflow. So really, that's all there is to this tool. It is a great way to create surfaces. I use it a lot. When you're working, try to think about times when you could use this. Like if you're making things like, a soda can, or maybe the little poles that connect to the dowlings that connect to the banister on a stairway. Those are created in a wood shop on an object called a lathe, which behaves in the exact same way. It rotates an object around and you carve on it while it's spinning. And it's the same thing here. Bullets inside of a gun can be created this way. I think actually in the I thought about using this for the silencer on the SOCOM model that pops up in this VTM, but I think I just did that with extrusions. But you could indeed just create like a side profile for the silencer and revolve it around. There's all sorts of ways to apply this tool, so try to keep that in mind while you're working, because this can really speed you up. So that's going to wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.